York's classic rock, Q1043.
Ken Dashow, New York's classic rock, Q104.3. With me in the studio, somebody, it's a thrill to be able to say my old friend, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. How sweet does that sound?
It sounds good.
Colin Blunstone, lead singer of the Zombies. Welcome back to Q1043.
Thanks, Ken. It's really great to be here with you.
We love having you back. We started with Cindy, your manager, told me this journey of renaissance, of resurrection, 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
It's nearly 25 years, yes.
How is that possible?
I know it's gone in a flash, and I know you were partly responsible for getting us back into America on this adventure that we've been on.
It was the weirdest thing how this happened. There was a manager who had a bunch of acts from the 60s, and Billy J. Kramer and Mark Lindsay of the Raiders and Colin and Rod of the Zombies, and they were doing this showcase. And their managers, Chris and Cindy, who were the assistants, said, I think that's a real band. And tell me if I'm getting the story right, that they said, look, if you guys want to really do this and be the Zombies again, we'll quit this and we will just work for you and we will help you rebuild the Zombies and see how far we can take it. Have I gotten that right?
It's absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely correct.
And these are two young people, in their 20s at the time, to take that leap of faith, but you sounded damn good. And what I've always said is, unlike any band's journey, so many bands, they have a giant hit, they have great tours and selling out in the big hits, and then egos clash because there's a lot of money and they break up. And then sometimes, like Oasis or Guns N' Roses, we're never touring again, but they get to take victory laps. For this band, the Zombies, the most remarkable thing in the world happened. They broke up before their legendary album even came out. Odessey and Oracle, recorded during the same time, 67, as Sgt. Pepper's and Magical Mystery Tour. And it was done, right? You're gone. The Zombies are gone. Rod went on to form Argent in the early 70s, yes. And you were performing as a solo artist.
That's right. Absolutely. The point was that when Odessey and Oracle was finished, it was a time when singles were very dominant. And in the UK, we released Care of Cell 44, which was the first track on the album, which CBS considered to be the most commercial track. It wasn't successful. And everything seemed to be telling us, it's time for us to take a break. It's time for us to think about new projects. Maybe the band has run its course. But we overlooked the fact that Odessey and Oracle, our album, single had been released, but the album hadn't even been released. And the band finished before the album was released. Even then, it did take a little time before people started to notice it. But about 2 years after the band finished, Time of the Season was #1 in Cashbox in America and probably #2 in Billboard. And there was no band. We'd finished. It's a very strange situation.
I would say so. It's actually thanks to Al Cooper, the man who started Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Al Cooper went to England just to see if there were any singles or something that people could have for albums. And he happened to put it on because he loved this cover, which is really cool, and said, you've got a smash hit single. And they go, no, those guys are gone. It's a smash hit single. And there it is, but there's no band. Side story. ZZ Top and Billy Gibbons told me himself they weren't getting anywhere as a bar band, and they called themselves the Zombies, these three guys from Texas, and covered your songs and made some money pretending to be the Zombies, singing in Southern Texas accents.
I know. And I always think, I think, great, I'm glad they did.
Really?
Well, we weren't using the name. And it's so important that musicians can work. It's such a tough game being in the music
business. It's really
business.
kind.
And I was really pleased that they got a gig out of it. It's really good. Just to go on from there, Chris White, the original bass player in the Zombies, was in the offices of Rolling Stone, and they were talking to them about, there were two bands pretending to be the Zombies, and they got Chris White to ring up the manager of one of the bands to try and get him to talk about the motivation, why are they doing this, and so forth. And the manager straight away went into, they were trying to honor the life of the lead singer in the Zombies who had been killed in a car crash.
What? Colin.
And news of my death was announced somewhat
Prematurely.
So
Oh, man.
that was his story, that I died in a car crash. But he thought he was talking to someone from Rolling Stone, which in a
Right.
way he was, but he was actually talking to the original bass player
And your dear
Rolling
friend.
Stone, my dear friend Chris White, who knew. I think he probably phoned me that night and said, you haven't been killed, have you? I said, not to my knowledge, no. So that was a sort of an added on bit about the phony zombies.
It's a remarkable journey, and then how it happens is so accidental. There was no guru who had kind of planned this whole thing out and charted the course. How you and Rod played, what is it that brought you back together to play? There was was it a benefit show or something?
Well, we did play a benefit show, which probably refamiliarized us with being on stage together. But for me, the crux was I had a solo band, and the keyboard player kept going absent without leave. He had an Achilles heel in that if anybody asked him to play any gig in a little coffee shop up the road, but play some of his songs, he would just disappear, and I would be turning up at quite big, prestigious gigs without a keyboard player. And the last time he did it, I managed to get another keyboard player in, who didn't know me or any of my music, and we had no time to rehearse. And so somehow we got through this show with someone who didn't know what he was playing. I'll be honest with you, I thought I was going to have a heart attack because I just didn't know what was going on. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. I rang up Rod and I said, I've got 6 shows left on this tour. Would you consider coming out and to help me do these 6 shows? And he said, I'd love to play these 6 shows, but I don't. After that, he was a very successful producer, and I don't want to do any more than 6 shows. But he loved it so much that those 6 shows developed into 25 years, which is sort of typical of the Zombies story, really.
Did you play some Zombies? Did you do Time of the Season?
Very little. I think we did Time of the Season and She's Not There, but both of us have had solo careers, so we concentrated on that because we thought, this is 1999, the Zombies finished in 1967, we thought there would be no interest in the Zombies, and it was a total surprise to us that people kept asking for more zombie tunes.
Did people go crazy when you played it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As soon as we played zombie tunes, more zombie tunes. And so after, it took a few years, but after a few years, we realized we were playing a zombie set. It's very, very bizarre. And so we had a meeting with Chris White and Hugh Grundy, the other 2 surviving original members, and said, look, by chance, we found ourselves in this situation where we're playing a zombie set, and it's being very well received. Wouldn't it make sense if we called the band the Zombies? And they totally agreed, and I've always thought of it as the second incarnation of the Zombies. It's not the original Zombies, but it's got one of the main songwriters and the keyboard player and the main lead singer. And I think it's quite a creditable version of the Zombies. And of course, we're playing all the original songs with the original arrangements, but we had to start from the beginning. We were playing small rooms in the back of pubs,
right.
And gradually, just through word of mouth, we built it up until that great evening where we spent some of that evening together, if you remember.
Yes.
In 2019 at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and we were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
It's amazing. I remember, for me, the first gig I ever saw you play at was at the old Cutting Room. Like we're talking about where the old schoolhouse used to be on 24th Street. And like you said, playing clubs, playing pubs, maybe 100 people there, 150 people. And I'm sitting at the Barclays with there's Def Leppard, and my friends, the Zombies, are being inducted in the Rock Hall of Fame. And I was sitting there that night just thinking about the Cutting Room, thinking about first time I saw you at the Bottom Line when you were showcasing with Margot, with Chris, and this journey, this incredible journey of what it became. And, so many times you hear about, well, they didn't invite the drummer back because, he once said something about my then wife, and I'll never forget it. And, there's always that. But you get your original drummer, you get Hugh Grundy back, and Chris White, bass player, songwriter, singer, and Paul Atkinson, the guitarist who passed, but he became a record executive I'm sure if he would have been healthy, I'm sure Paul would have been there.
Of course he would. Of course.
And you stayed friends. You guys, you're the ones who said by breaking up, we were able to save our friendships.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up together. We spent our formative years together. Those friendships last for a lifetime, you know. And all the things, all the adventures we went through on the 3 years from 64 to 67, how can you ever forget that? So we did remain friends. And in later life, we got the opportunity to tour playing the whole of Odessey and Oracle in its entirety, every note from beginning to end, with the original players. And I'll tell you a funny story about with Chris White and Hugh Grundy. They hadn't played regularly, but Rod and I had played professionally around the world. And we had a little meeting, Rod and I, and we said, you know, before we do Odessey and Oracle in its entirety, we need to check if Hugh and Chris can still play.
Right.
I mean, we're presuming they can still play.
Right, but you don't want to embarrass them or be embarrassed yourselves.
Absolutely. So we got together with them, and they'd obviously been practicing hour after hour. And the two people we were worried about were note perfect. They were wonderful. And Rod and I were absolute rubbish because we presumed we were going to be okay. And we hadn't rehearsed at all. It was incredibly embarrassing that the other half of the band were wonderful. And Rod and I, then we had to start being serious about doing Odessey and Oracle. We had to start relearning the songs, you know.
Chris told me that version of the story. He heard you playing and he stopped and said, "That's not how it goes."
Yes.
And he said the two of them were a bit chuffed. They were a bit rankled.
Yes.
And said, well, no, we've been playing it for a while. And he said, "That's not how it goes."
It was a real wake up call for us, because we thought, you know, we've been playing regularly. We know we've got this in our back pockets. And it was just, anyway, it was a wonderful experience. Originally we were going to play it for one night at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, lovely old theatre in London. And that grew into 3 nights. And then we were asked to tour around the UK. And then eventually we played in Europe, and we played quite a lot in America. We went all around America playing Odessey and Oracle. Who would have ever dreamt that would happen?
Nobody.
How many years? 67. I think the last time we did Odessey and Oracle was probably about 2018 or something like that. Might even been 2019.
Wow.
After all those years to go back and play with the original band.
The flip side of that, the reason it worked and the reason it's so good is that, and I don't say this because I'm your friend or a fan, your voice is absolutely gorgeous. You've lost nothing. You're singing in the same key. Rod was able to play perfectly. Musically, it was fine. You didn't need 15 people on stage to cover what you couldn't do. You didn't have to run a hard drive to cover the notes you can't hit. It's absolutely pure and perfect that your gift stayed intact. And if you want to see the story about this documentary that we've been touring around America, Hanging On to a Dream, it's absolutely wonderful because it does, interviewing them, telling their story. Is that ever going to get to a streaming platform?
It's actually available now on Amazon TV and on Amazon Prime. No, sorry, Apple TV and Amazon Prime. I've got a crib sheet down here, but I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't read it very well.
So Apple TV and Amazon Prime.
Apple TV and Amazon Prime.
You guys so need to see this.
Yeah, I mean, it was directed by Robert Schwartzman. And he's really done a wonderful job on it, and he's found clips of us when we were teenagers that I didn't even know existed.
Really?
So for me, it was a real experience.
Was it bizarre seeing yourself like in that movie as a documentary about you?
I know, you go through so many different feelings. It's very emotional, exciting, sad. You know, I came out drained after the first time I saw it. I'd seen 80 years shrunken into an hour and a half. And I've now seen it 3 or 4 times, and each time I see it, I see something else, you know. And it's a wonderful experience. That first time was a little bit
nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it was a bit challenging.
What did Rod think? Was he?
I think much the same. Yeah. You know, I think we were supporting one another physically as we walked out. We were so exhausted.
Well, I think anybody would feel that way of like, "Hi, we made a documentary about your life. Here are the highs and lows."
Yes.
What? I'd rather you didn't like this, but But, it's wonderful to be there. And now, the latest, Odyssey and Oracle. Let's talk about this album for a minute. Made in 1967, and here's the Beatles connection. The late Jeff Emmerich, the brilliant engineer who, from Revolver, and helped them. He didn't record. He helped as an artist build Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He helped build Strawberry Fields, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, A Day in the Life. And at the end of the year, they do Magical Mystery Tour, the psychedelic, beautiful, multi-soundscape album. And he said, all these bands would come in and say, can we get the Beatles engineer? Can we get Beatles? He said, I don't want to make another band sound like the Beatles. What do you sound like? And he said, these guys came in and said, we're going to produce it ourselves. And would you help us? And we want to find our own sound, hear the songs. And I said, yes, I'd be honored to. And that's why some of that magic, not only is it Studio 2 in Abbey Road, it's the man up in the booth, Jeff Emmerich, who is helping. Jeff, what an amazing job.
I know. He was wonderful. We were so fortunate to be able to get into Abbey Road. It was called EMI Studios at the time.
Yeah.
And really, they only featured EMI artists. So it's a little bit of a mystery. A lot of the Zombies' career is a little bit of a mystery to me. I don't understand what happened. I don't know how we were allowed to record in that studio. To my knowledge, no people outside of EMI recorded in EMI Studios, but we did. And yes, we were incredibly fortunate to be working with Jeff Emmerich. It was brilliant.
And the other part of this story is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the Beatles were finishing up Sgt. Pepper's, and they had their equipment out. Like the Mellotron was still on stage that John Lennon was playing. And am I correct that Rod asked Jeff, can I use this? It's
Absolutely.
the Beatles. And he said, it's in the studio. It's plugged in. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to listen to Odessey and Oracle and try to imagine it without a Mellotron, it would be a totally different album. It was just chance that John Lennon left the Mellotron behind. So it was a wonderful gift for Rod and for the band. But going on from there, because we were such big Beatles fans, we were picking up percussion instruments, picking up off the floor that we knew the Beatles had left that tambourine there, these maracas here. It was a very strange experience, but really sort of energizing for the beginning of the project to know that the biggest band in the world had just been recording in the studio.
Yeah, and you didn't know they're making this masterpiece, right? That was going to change the world.
We didn't know anything. We knew they'd finished an album, but
Right.
we didn't know anything about it, because sometimes people ask us, was Odessey and Oracle in any way influenced by Sgt. Pepper? But it had only just been finished, literally
Right.
2 days, I think, before we went in. So we didn't hear any of it before we were recording Odessey and Oracle.
The wildest thing, though, is that sonically, when you listen to Odyssey and Oracle, it sounds as if it was part of a whole. I don't know what it was. It was England. It was Studio 2. It was 67. It was the mindset of the time. But Beechwood Park and Strawberry Fields could have been two sides of a single. And I'm serious. The mindset of escaping, getting back to nature, being in a beautiful state of mind. There's a positivity to it. There's a beauty to it. There's pain and hardship. Chris White's The Butcher's Tale, just heartbreaking. And there's an amazing amount of music. But when you hear Odyssey and Oracle, you can't not hear Peppers. It's so much a part of the sound. And I know it sounds a little hippy-dippy and all that, but I do believe there's an energy, and fate just said, you have to be here now and make these songs. You need this guy, you need this equipment, you need to keep going on this journey. And that's what it was. And now, again, going back to the late Jeff Emmerich, who, when Sgt. Pepper's was remixed, I mean, he doesn't dislike Giles Martin. He thinks Giles Martin is brilliant, but he said, if you want to hear what Sgt. Pepper's is supposed to sound like, get yourself a good mono copy. That's what it's supposed to sound like. That's what we slaved over. That's what I worked over. They called it a balance engineer. You balanced the sounds. You balanced where things went. You helped assemble it with the band. And whether the producer's George Martin or whether it's Colin Blunstone and Rod Argent, you help them assemble it and see what sounds right. And it's all balanced for mono. And in 1967, we always think of Sgt. Pepper's as this wild psychedelic stereo thing. but now it's a little ham-fisted. It's a little heavy. Do you think that to hear Odessey and Oracle the right way, it should be in mono?
I think, yes, I would say absolutely. But I have to sort of also qualify that by saying that I'm a little embarrassed to say I haven't heard it in mono at this moment in time. I've heard what people have said about it in mono, but I haven't actually heard it. I hope in the next few days I will hear it. But I'm sure that it will sound, I think it'll sound incredible. It's going to sound very, very crisp and exciting. And I just remember that is the way that we wanted it to sound. But also, if I could just go on and mention Jeff Emmerich.
Yeah.
We saw him quite comparatively recently. I would say probably, well, I know it was a couple of weeks before, sadly, he died. We were playing in the Greek Theatre in Los Angeles, and he came into the dressing room and he said, you know, guys, remember the time in Abbey Road? Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And he said, we've got to work together again. He just kept saying that. As he left the room, he was saying, and I'm serious, we've got to work together again. And we were thinking, wouldn't that be fantastic to work with Jeff Emmerich again? Wouldn't that be brilliant?
It'd be so much fun.
And then it was days afterwards that he died. I'll always remember that. I would love to have worked with him again. He was just one of a kind.
I mean, his book, that's of all the books written about the Beatles, Here, There, and Everywhere, My Life Recording
fantastic.
It, isn't it?
I love that book.
Me too.
And I love, also because you touched on it, there's a paragraph about the Zombies. I don't think he mentions many other bands.
No.
But he said the only band that came into the studio, just to paraphrase what you just said, the only band that came into the studio, into Abbey Road or EMI Studios, who didn't say, we want to sound like the Beatles, was the Zombies.
Right.
I was reading his book just because I'm a fan. You know, I didn't know that was going to come up, and I had to keep going back and reading it. I thought, boy, he remembers us, you know, and he remembers those days. That was fantastic.
He always said he was very proud of this album. He said, I'm as proud of Odessey and Oracle as I was of anything I did with the boys.
Wow.
That was his exact quote. Because of that, he said, because we were creating something that was special to them, so it was special to me. And,
Brilliant.
you know, you think of this 18-year-old kid, and he's just the tape operator, you know, hit record, hit stop, get fresh reels, write down stuff on the box. And, you know, Norman Smith goes off to work with this crazy band called the Pink Floyd. Whoever heard, I don't know what happened to those guys. But so you're the engineer, and his first day, 18 years old, his first song is Tomorrow Never Knows. And John Lennon says to him, I want to sound like the Dalai Lama on a mountaintop. And George Martin said, right, let's go get some tea. Let's go to the canteen and let's get Jeff sorted out. It's like, right, yeah, Dalai Lama, mountaintop. What do I have? And that's how, when you record now, everything's a digital, it's a punch. You can make any sound at all. You just punch it in on Pro Tools. Jeff is using string, and he took the front of the bass drum off and put a Rolling Stones doll in it. He moved the microphones. He took the air conditioner vent off and put a microphone under the piano, and he was just making it up as he went. And I said to him, Jeff, every physical thing you did, putting the mic down the hallway and record, you know.
I know. It's just phenomenal. And also, I got the impression from that book, and I'm saying this in a very light-hearted way, you know, but I thought that people at EMI Studios / Abbey Road would do anything to work with the Beatles. But because they work such long hours, often through the night, and the engineers wouldn't have time, the Beatles would then go home to bed, but the engineers would work through the night, then they'd have to start in the morning with the next artist who's coming in. I got the message from that book that often people would do anything to not get a Beatles session. They didn't want to work with the Beatles. And I just found that phenomenal, you know, probably the most important band in contemporary music. And people in the studio, perhaps not at first, but after a while, they didn't want to work with them because they worked all night and they were just exhausted. But I know that Jeff Emmerich did nearly all of their recording.
And
you know,
that's, as an 18-year-old kid, you're more passionate about it. The others are saying, well, I don't want to work 8 hours. I want to work, 4 hours and then take my lunch break. It was very cut and dried. Rod and you guys told the story. Here's what the engineers were right. The brown coats that at Abbey Road, and Tell the story. You're in the middle of a take, and it was
Absolutely.
lunchtime. Tell
Well,
the
I
story.
would just say that, first of all, the engineers all wore collar and ties.
Right.
The tech assistants wore long white coats. It was very regimented. And the guys that moved gear around wore the long brown coats. And we were recording a song called Changes, which is on Odessey and Oracle. It's the only time that we all sang backup harmonies together. And because it was all of us, we were standing right next to the piano, so we could all get our entry note from the piano. And because they were very rigid about time, for us they were anyway, the first session ran from 10 to 1, and at 1 you had to finish.
Lunch break.
Lunch break. And although the red light was still on, meaning we're recording, it went to 1 o'clock. And 2 guys in the long brown coats came in, and they wanted the piano somewhere else. So we're standing by the piano, getting our note from the piano, recording Changes. 2 guys come in and move the piano out of the studio. I don't know where they took it, but I like to think, I don't think you can, this is just a romantic thought, that you can hear these guys talking to one another on the track and moving. Maybe there's a squeaky wheel on the piano and you can hear it. You can't, but I like to think that you can, because we just soldiered on.
You kept singing?
Oh, absolutely. we had such a tight budget. We didn't have any money for stopping and starting in the studio. We were recording really, really fast. So we're doing this big block harmony. 2 guys come in and start moving a piano amongst us singing, and we just kept going.
Right, yeah. Move that over here. Yeah, George, get the other end, will you?
That's exactly what it was like, and we just kept going.
Okay, now I have to listen to it really, really
Yeah,
loud.
I don't
See if
think
I
it's
can
that.
pick it up.
Honestly, I've listened very, very closely, but I'd like to think it's on there.
So the mono version of Odessey and Oracle, I think September 26th, it's out and released.
Yes, absolutely, on Beechwood Park Records.
Oh, perfect.
Did I say that already? I'm not sure
No.
if I did. Yes, we've been, after 60 or 70 years in the business, we actually have our own label.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
Congratulations, darling. Ccongratulations. Only took 60 years, but
I know,
well
we've
done.
got our
Well
own-
done, you.
We've got our own label, and it's been distributed by Q Prime, who
Oh, they're terrific. They're tremendous.
Yes, who manage Metallica.
Yeah.
So we're with a really sophisticated and wonderful bunch of people helping us with this album, and it's released on September the 26th. So it's exciting times. As we've said before, you never know what's going to happen in this business.
Yeah.
And who would have thought this would be released in mono after all this time?
And the biggest, I did this podcast, an interview with this guy, Larry Chaffee, who wrote a book, the return of vinyl, the greatest surprise in the 21st century. The greatest, because I gave away all of my vinyl. That's never coming back. And I've been rebuying everything. And the hottest thing that I'm told for Gen Z, especially, and Gen X, vinyl records. We buy all of our 20-something friends vinyl records because they've only heard crappy MP3 audio on their cheap headphones. And even on a modest stereo, to hear vinyl, to hear sounds you never heard before is mind-blowing.
Absolutely. I'm buying vinyl too.
Really?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it.
God. Colin Blunstone, sometimes the good guys win in this crazy business. Congratulations. Long live the zombies. That's a weird thing to say, but long live the zombies.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It's been great meeting with you once again. And
Always.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.